Hey folks, welcome back. Thought I'd try to do something a little bit different today. One of the reasons I started making these videos is I kind of feel like the last few years I've been a self-appointed board game ambassador. I try to introduce a lot of people to the board gaming hobby because I've had so much fun with it, and my kids have enjoyed it. We've got a lot of benefits from it. I met so many nice people, but I kind of feel like not many people know about board gaming or don't realize sort of that the whole world that's out there in gaming. So one of the questions that I get a lot from people that I introduce to some of these different games is like, where do you get games like this? Because a lot of us grew up playing Monopoly and Scrabble and Risk and sort of all those basic games, the Game of Life and Sorry and all those things. And when I introduce them to games like Wingspan or Imhotep or Baron Park, they're like, where do you even find games like this? So today I'm going to do a quick list of just 5 places where I search for board games. And I kind of feel like for me, board gaming is sort of this whole world that I want to introduce people to. A lot of my friends and family members are into hunting and fishing as a hobby, for example. And I've hunted and fished before. You know, I know how to put a worm on a hook and throw a line in the water. But you know, board gaming is sort of like if you play Monopoly or Risk, that's sort of the level of throwing the worm in the water, you know, in terms of the fishing analogy, if you will. So, you know, I have friends that like to fly fish or, you know, go deep sea fishing. They're into different kinds of lures and tying flies, or, you know, there's waterfowl hunting, big game, small game, muzzle loading, archery. You know, I recognize that in that hobby, in that world, there's a whole lot of stuff that I've never been introduced to or I know nothing about. Well, board gaming's sort of the same way. And so when I first got into it, I wasn't even aware of the fact that these things were out there, or how do you go about, you know, getting a hold of games like this. So that's the reason for this video. I just wanted to sort of introduce this and let people know different ways that they can go about getting a hold of some of these games if they're interested in it. And I'm going to sort of go through an evolution, because this has been an evolution for me of sort of how I started out to where I am now in this hobby. And the first place that I started to get games was secondhand. So I would go out on eBay, I would go to thrift stores, Goodwill, yard sales, things like that. And a lot of times when I first started, I would be looking for games like this. This is History of the World from a game called Avalon Hill. Back in the 70s and 80s, they were sort of, as far as I can tell, the only game in town in terms of deep, thinky board games. And so when I first started collecting games and started getting into it, I would go out on eBay and I would search for Avalon Hill. And then whatever popped up, I would go try to get a copy of those and you know, play different Avalon Hill games. I'd also tried yard sales, thrift stores, things like that. The trouble with that is a lot of times you end up with games like this, sort of standard run-of-the-mill party games, or, you know, 800 versions of Trivial Pursuit if you go to Goodwill. So that can be pretty hit and miss. I've had some luck at Goodwill and some of the thrift stores from time to time. I actually found a copy of Suburbia one time, which is supposedly a really good game, for like $5. And I picked it up. I ended up trading it away. But every once in a while, you might find something. But a lot of times, the thrift stores are kind of eh. And frankly, I don't really use eBay anymore either. I haven't bought anything on eBay in probably 10 years. But when I first started out, that's what I was looking for. Nowadays, if I'm getting things secondhand, a lot of times it'll be because people tell me about a yard sale, or somebody that they know who has a collection that's trying to sell a bunch of games. And so Facebook Marketplace, I'll see them on there. I've picked up some good games that way. This is one called Kraftwagen, and it just so happened to be somebody near my house was selling a bunch of games, you know, starting to cull their collection, and so I was able to pick up this one, which is pretty cool. I did find a game at Goodwill called Spy Alley, which is pretty cool, so I've had some luck there. I've also done a few trades with people online and picked up games that I still have never played, or games that were sort of duds. So try to do as much research as you can up front, you know what you're getting into. But a lot of times with secondhand games, you're really taking a shot in the dark and just trying to get lucky. there's a website called BoardGameGeek.com, and they have a section. They actually have an algorithm or a tool that's on there that can help you find games. And that's where I found this game, Xi'an the Terracotta Army, which is a fantastic game. But what you do on BGG is you can upload your collection, and essentially it's just a database. And then you list games that you have that you're willing to trade, and you can do a search for, you know, games that you're looking for. You put them on your wish list, and then essentially you just click the button, and it matches you up with people who have that game and are looking to get rid of it for games that you're trying to get a hold of. And that's how I found this game. So it's still a secondhand game. It's a trade, but it's sort of using technology and the internet to help you find and target the games that you really want. The downside to using BGG is that people don't tend to be very responsive on there. A lot of times I've proposed trades to people, you know, and it's like they're looking for the game I have and I'm looking for the game they have, but they just don't ever respond. Or people have these exorbitant values that they put on their own games, you know, and they want you to trade 10 of your games for their one or something crazy like that. So doesn't always work out, but going secondhand, finding used games is a really good way to sort of dip your feet in the water, not put out a big investment, but be able to try some different stuff and see what you like. The next place I want to talk about as a source for getting good games is your big box retail stores. You can go to Walmart, Target, Ollie's, Barnes & Noble. Back in the day when I started getting into this, those places didn't have anything other than Monopoly Life and sort of the run-of-the-mill trivia games and things like that. Today, though, places like Target, they have a really good selection of games. And Barnes & Noble, they've expanded their game sections a lot. And my understanding is it's because they're making a lot of money off of those games. But those places have a great selection these days. I find that Walmart's prices tend to be a little higher. Target, a lot of times you can find some really good deals. They'll have clearances or different deals. And Target has a really great selection of games. So big box retailers are becoming a better source in terms of finding decent games. It used to be the games you found there were just no good. But nowadays they got some good stuff. The one place I will touch on, I don't know who's watching this, and if anybody from Western Pennsylvania has Ollie's Bargain Outlet near them, or you may have something similar. But I've acquired a lot of games over the years. Ollie's tends to have a really big selection of games on, like, what do they call it, overstock type games. And especially around Christmas time. Just a few that I've picked up there. A lot of these haven't been huge hits. This is a game called Totem. It's kind of a mix between chess and checkers a little bit. I bought it because it has a really cool theme and it looks really neat. It wasn't a game that was a huge hit for us. But the thing about a place like Ollie's is, you know, you can spend $5 or $10 and you can get a game, and if it's not a hit, no big deal. Another game, a lot of times they'll have kids games. This is Jungle Joust. It's one that we haven't had a chance to play yet. Again, I got it because the box art, you know, caught my attention and it looked kind of cool. But you can find games like this. A lot of times what I look for is I look for the publisher. This is from a company called IDW. And a lot of times once you start getting into gaming, you'll start to recognize who some of these publishers are. And you know that they tend to put out decent games and they put out higher quality games. Another example of that would be Phantom Society from Yellow. Yellow puts out some great games, some of my favorite games. So anytime I go to a discount store and I see a game put out by a well-known publisher like this, I tend to pick it up just because the odds are decent that it'll be a good game. They're not always a hit, but a lot of times if it's from a good publisher, even if it's not one of their higher rated games, it's worth giving a shot to. At the same time, sometimes you may get lucky. This is a game that I never had high hopes for. It's from Mattel. A lot of the mass market stuff is not very good. Somebody gave this to me as a gift, and it's actually in my top 10 games of all time. I've seen it at Ollie's for like $8, $9, and I've kind of wished, kicked myself that I hadn't picked up another copy of it. But you may get lucky, and you know, for $10, I can't even tell you the number of plays that we've gotten out of this and the number of hours of enjoyment that we've gotten from this little game. A couple more gems that I've found. Ghost Fighting Treasure Hunters. One thing you may notice on a box, sometimes they'll have a Dice Tower Seal of Excellence. I mentioned in my previous videos, I really trust the guys at the Dice Tower, and that's where I go to for board game reviews. And so when it has the Dice Tower Seal of Excellence, I know it's a good game. They'll also have the Spiel des Jahres symbol, or the Kinderspiel symbol. And what this is a international festival of board gaming that they have every year in Germany. And so if it's been nominated for one of their awards, or if it's won one of their awards, you know it's a really good game. Again, I found this one at Ollie's on a discount. It must have just been an overrun or something. But it's a super good co-op game for kids. Fantastic game, and I didn't know anything about it. But I just saw that symbol that said it had been nominated for an award at the Spiel, and I knew, well, it must be a pretty good game. So I picked it up. Fantastic. The last one I'll talk about, and I'll go back to, you know, the big box retailer thing. This is a game that's available widely at Target, and again, in the old days, you couldn't find good games at stores like that. But this is another one of my top 10 of all-time board games. It's another co-op, actually, where you're fighting against different movie monsters. But awesome game, widely available. You can pick it up at any Target. So big box retailers, even though they may have sort of a bad name in terms of the previous history and what you used to be able to get there, nowadays you can get some pretty good stuff. The next source of games I want to talk about in the board game circles is what's known as your FLGS, Friendly Local Game Store. Now where I live in a pretty rural area, so we don't really have many game stores around. The closest one to me is about 30-35 minutes away, and so I don't get down that way very often. So this is not an area where I buy a lot of games from the local game store, because I just don't have access to that. But game stores typically have staff that can really help in terms of picking out a game that you might like. The prices at the local game stores tend to be a little bit higher, you know, with any brick and mortar store, because you're not going to a big box and you're not buying it online, you know, through Amazon or some discount thing. So the prices tend to be a little higher, but I try to patronize the local stores as much as I can, just because I appreciate the fact that they're there. I appreciate the variety that they provide and the services that they provide. So just a couple highlights of a few games that I've picked up at local game stores. One of my favorites is called Dice Town, and this one I happen to be in Cranberry, a place near here, and that's where the closest game store is to my place. And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to get a game while I'm here, just because I love the fact that there's a game store here. I hope that it stays here, and I hope there's always one nearby. And I was walking through, this one happened to be, there was a sale or a discount, and I didn't know anything about it. The only thing, you know, was just going by the cover. I knew Bruno Cathala was one of my favorite designers. He was one of the first designers that I started to recognize that name. And so I saw his name, and I saw the theme that I liked. I picked it up because it was on sale, and fantastic. One of my favorite games of all time. So this was a huge hit. Another time that I had a lot of success was I stopped in Gettysburg. I like to go. I lived in Gettysburg at one time, but I also visit there quite often. And I noticed one time there was a new game store there. Don't know if it's still around, but it hadn't been there before the last time I had visited. So my son and I went in. They had a great selection of games, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to buy a game here just because I really appreciate the fact that they're here and I want to patronize their business. And so the hard part was deciding which one to buy, because they had such a huge selection and there were so many good games that I had heard about in different reviews. And I picked out Lords of Waterdeep just because I had heard it was a really good game, looked like something that we would be interested in. And again, turned out to be one of my top 10 games of all time. I think this game was like $60, which is about the threshold for me. You know, a lot of people are surprised when they get into gaming how expensive games are, because they're used to going to Walmart and picking up a game for $15, you know, a copy of Monopoly or something, and they're surprised, like, wow, people pay $60 for a board game. The thing about it is, you know, if you play this game 30 times and there's 4 of you playing, so that's 120 plays. In terms of bang for your buck, board games tend to be a really great value, even though the sticker might be a little bit higher than you anticipate at the beginning. So this was one that I was sort of on the fence, like, do I want to spend that much on a board game? But it's been a huge, great value for us, and I was really glad that I picked it up. Most recent example of that for me is a game called Ready, Set, Bet. And this is another one that I had heard great reviews from the Dice Tower on. And I was out visiting my son in Ohio and noticed that he had a game store nearby. So again, we were actually getting ready to go to a party over at his friend's house, little pizza party, get together. And we thought, you know what, we're going to swing by the game store and we're going to pick up a party game that we can play when we get there. And I had heard some great reviews on this, and we picked it up. We didn't end up playing it that night, but we've played it since then, and it's a huge, huge hit. So my suggestion with the friendly local game stores, the FLGS, is to do your research ahead of time. Because the prices tend to be a little bit higher, you know, it's not like going to a bargain store or buying something secondhand where you can just throw $5 or $10 out there and hope for the best. You know, a game that you're going to invest $50 or $60 in, you want to know ahead of time that it's going to be a hit, and the odds are going to be pretty good that it's something that you like. So I highly recommend do your research ahead of time. Go into the store with an idea in mind of what you want to get before you go, or ask somebody at the store for help and they can point you in the right direction. As I mentioned, you know, my buying habits have sort of evolved over time. So, you know, I do a lot less thrift shopping and sort of buying random sporadic things and hoping for the best nowadays, as I do more targeted acquisitions, if you will. Now that I'm tuned into the Dice Tower and a couple other places for board game reviews, a lot of times I know what I want ahead of time, and I'm not just trying to build my collection volume wise as much as I am trying to find games that fit a certain niche or just really sound great. And so I've sort of raised the bar in terms of what I'm looking for. So nowadays I tend to buy a lot more games online because I'm looking for targeted purchases. There are a number of really good websites online. Again, the Dice Tower is really important to me in supporting that channel on YouTube because they've helped me so much and they've really helped get me into the hobby. So I tend to support the companies that sponsor their content. So I used to buy games from a company called Cool Stuff Inc. that has a really good website. Nowadays they're sponsored by a company called Game Nerds. Last summer I found out that Game Nerds has this annual event where they do major discounts. Like once an hour they'll put out, you know, in this case Seven Wonders Architects was on sale for maybe half price, I think, and it's only good, you know, for that day, and there's a limited quantity. So basically you got to log in and hopefully you get in there and get what you want at a super deep discount. But Game Nerds I really like a lot. They got some great stuff as well as cool stuff. Miniature Market is another company that has a really good website. I think they're connected with Asmodee, or that might be the retail distributor for the Asmodee stuff. This is the most recent game I purchased, actually. My grandmother sent me some birthday money, and this is a game that I've wanted to add to my collection for a really long time because Ticket to Ride is one of a handful of my favorite games ever. And I had heard from a lot of people that the Pennsylvania board was their favorite version of Ticket to Ride. It adds sort of a stock collection, set collection mechanism to it. And I'm from Pennsylvania, so just that map obviously intrigues me as well. So again, targeted purchase. I knew exactly what I wanted, so I went, searched a couple different websites looking to see who had it. This is a game that is not widely available anymore, so you kind of have to search around and try to find it. But Game Nerds is a good one, as is Miniature Market, and as I mentioned, Cool Stuff. Another source obviously is Amazon. I try to avoid buying too much on Amazon just because it's like Amazon is taking over the world in some ways, and so as much as I hate to give them too much of my business, sometimes, you know, they have what you're looking for and it's at a really good price. This is a game that I found, it's by Elizabeth Hargraves, who's the designer of Wingspan, and my wife and I both love Wingspan, and when I saw that she had another game on butterflies, I'm like, I gotta get it. So I went to Amazon, super good price. You know, if you have Amazon Prime, they get it to you within a day or two. And so, you know, as much as I want to be able to support our local game stores and board game cafes and all that, sometimes Amazon's going to get you the best deal, and that, you know, everybody's on a budget, so that's a great source as well. So the last source of board games that I want to talk about is one, again, as my tastes have evolved, this is something that's new to me, and that is board game conventions. I never even realized there was such a thing. And for people who are just getting into it, obviously they're not going to spend all kinds of money to travel and go to a convention. But if you start to get into the hobby and you really enjoy it, to me, the board game conventions are a great way to try out games and to get what you're looking for, and to find, you know, talk to publishers, go and try out some of their games. There's been quite a few games that I was like, boy, that looks really good. And I almost pulled the trigger and ordered it online. Then I went to a board game convention and actually played it and was like, yeah, I'm glad I didn't spend my money on that. But there's other games that I've picked up at conventions, and I've only been to 2 conventions total. So, you know, I don't have a ton of personal experience here myself. But the games that I've picked up at the conventions that I've been to have been so good that it's like it makes me want to go back again, because we have such a good time trying out games and playing them while we're there, but we also end up picking up just a few games that make my collection so much better, and we get tons of enjoyment out of them. So a couple examples. The first convention I went to was in Columbus, Ohio at Origins, and this game Furnace was one that was being featured there. It was sort of like a hot new game that had come out, and I knew, I'd seen a review of it, I knew going in when I went to that convention, that's a game I want. So if I come away with one game, you know, if I'm only going to buy one game when I'm there, this is the one I'm going to buy. And great, I'm glad I did. Actually, when I was there, they were selling some bonus features, if you will. And one of the things they were selling as an upgrade was this neoprene play mat. And when I got home and finally played the game, I can't imagine buying this game without this mat. It was sort of an impulse buy at the time. I think it was an extra $10 or something when I purchased the game. But when I got home and played it, and I was like, boy, I can't imagine playing that game without the play mat. So a lot of times there are promo packs and there are special things that you can get at the conventions that you can't get anywhere else. And so that's another really cool advantage of doing conventions. Another game that I picked up there, though, that I had no prior knowledge of was just this little game called Mountain Goats. And we happened to be walking by the booth for this company and was like, boy, that's a pretty cool looking little game. And, you know, the price was pretty low because it's just a small game. And I was like, we're going to grab a copy of that and take it home and try it. So one of the other advantages of being there, even if you don't get to try the game, is you can walk around and see what catches your eye and pick one up while you're there. Another good example of that, the other board game convention I went to was called PAX Unplugged in Philadelphia, and went last December. This was a game that my son Levi saw at the Gamewright booth, and it wasn't one that would have necessarily caught my eye, but for whatever reason he was like, boy, that looks kind of cool. So we were actually able to go over to their game library, check it out, and play it. And we're like, boy, that really is a good game. And so we walked over to the publisher's booth and we bought a copy. And so, you know, there was another game we played at the same time, we checked out at the same time, that I would have probably bought first. But once we played it, I was like, nah, that one's not for me. Yet we played this one and we're like, no doubt, we're getting this. So, again, great opportunity to try out something new. The last one I'll talk about, because this is another one of my favorites, my wife and I love, is Cascadia. This was a targeted purchase. Just like Furnace, I knew going in, when I go to this convention, I want to get this game. So another advantage of the conventions is that you can see which publishers are going to be there ahead of time. You can, you know, do a little bit of research, find out where their booth is going to be located, and you can purposely go get what you need or get what you want. And it's not so much hit and miss. You know, it's not a scattershot approach. So, like I said, over time, my taste has sort of evolved, and my approach to getting games and sort of adding to my collection has evolved as well. Started out secondhand, have gotten things online, local stores, conventions. There's a lot of different places. Once you start to get tapped into the hobby, there's a lot of different places that you can get games and add to your collection. So if you need advice or if you're looking for suggestions, feel free to hit me up and let me know. I'm happy to share any knowledge that I've gained over the last few years enjoying this fun hobby. See you later.